They found the small frontier settlement in ashes, the silence as thick as the swirling dust. Broken wagon wheels, smoldering cabins, and lifeless bodies lay scattered under a blazing sun. No one could have survived such brutality yet. As Sheriff Martin Ray counted the dead, he heard a faint gasp beneath a bullet-riddled cottonwood. A young woman clung to life among the fallen leaves, her pale hair crusted with blood. Nearby stood a lone Navajo warrior, his eyes reflecting sorrow and fierce determination. Nobody expected anyone to be breathing after the massacre, but fate had other plans. Her name was Lucy Brooks, and this was only the beginning. The day before the massacre dawned like any other in the remote settlement of Willow Creek. Dusty roads crisscrossed the landscape, wagon wheels creaked under the weight of hopeful travelers, and the sweet smell of mesquite drifted from a nearby campfire. Families worked their small farms, pulling water from a trickling creek that wound through cottonwoods. There was an innocence to the place, an unspoken belief that if one worked hard and trusted in neighbors, blessings would follow. Lucy Brooks was just 19, yet the rigors of frontier life had already shaped her more than she realized. She was the daughter of Tom Brooks, a Civil War veteran who'd lost an eye at Gettysburg, and Harriet Brooks, whose health had become frail ever since a harsh winter claimed Lucy's younger sister. Lucy was more caretaker than child, more frontier tough than most men thrice her age. She learned to shoot at the age of 12, to read the desert's omens in the shape of morning clouds. She might not have known what lay beyond those distant purple hills, but she sensed her life was meant for more. For months, Lucy had been anticipating her 20th birthday. It was a quiet dream, imagining a day when there'd be time for picnics, sugar biscuits, and maybe even a dance under lantern light with the neighbor boy, James Durant, who was rumored to be sweet on her. But as the sun rose that fateful morning, her hopes were overshadowed by a creeping unease. A flock of crows circled overhead, and the livestock seemed skittish. Lucy couldn't have known that a band of ruthless outlaws led by the infamous Silas Black Vulture Kane was already en route to Willow Creek. On the horizon, dust plumes rose in ghostly shapes. Settlers peered toward the shimmer, squinting in the harsh glare. They thought it was a caravan, or perhaps cavalry riders, scouting for new routes. Children scampered back to their porches, their mothers calling them inside. Lucy stood at the well behind her family's cabin, drawing up a bucket of water for her mother. When she turned and lifted a hand to shield her eyes, her heart fluttered with an unexplainable dread. 15 riders draped in black coats galloped into Willow Creek like a thunderstorm. Their horses snorted, muscles rippling with each stride. The leader, Silas Kane, was a wiry figure with sunken cheeks and a mouth twisted into a permanent sneer. His reputation for cruelty was whispered across the territory. He was called Black Vulture for the way he circled small settlements, picking them clean of valuables before vanishing into the desert. When the first gunshot roared, the townsfolk froze in disbelief. Seconds stretched like hours. Then chaos erupted. Women screamed, children fled, and men scrambled for their rifles. Bullets whizzed through the dust-choked air. Tom Brooks had time only to shove Lucy behind a stack of crates, yelling for her to hide. Lucy, with trembling hands, clutched her father's old Colt revolver. Her mother, Harriet, was nowhere in sight. The outlaws didn't spare a single hut or cabin. They fired into doorways, kicked down fences, and lit torches that were tossed onto roofs. Flames began licking at the timbers, black smoke billowing upward in the sweltering midday heat. The few able-bodied men who tried to organize resistance quickly fell beneath the outlaws' barrage of bullets. The sound of cracking whips and horses' hooves blended with agonized cries. Lucy, pinned behind the crates, fought against the strangling fear that threatened to paralyze her. She remembered her father's drilling breathe. "Steady your grip. Don't rush the shot." When a masked rider galloped her way, rifle in hand, Lucy fired once. The recoil nearly knocked her onto her back. The shot found its mark, and the man lurched off his horse, collapsing into the dust. Shocked by her own lethal accuracy, Lucy gasped, but then steeled herself. If she didn't fight, she'd die. Nearby, Tom Brooks shouted, trying to draw the outlaws away from Lucy's hiding place. He fired 2 shots, taking down another rider. Silas Kane bellowed a curse, urging his men to swarm the older man. Gunfire tore through the air. Lucy watched in horror as her father jerked violently and fell. She cried out, a raw sound that blended with the roar of flames. Within the hour, the outlaws had turned Willow Creek into a living nightmare. Some settlers tried to flee on horseback or on foot, but the gang had the settlement surrounded. Lucy could only see flashes of violence half hidden by the smoky haze. At times, her ears rang so loudly that she could hardly make out the screams. Finally, as if sated by carnage, Silas Kane barked an order to his men. The guns quieted. Lucy peered around the edge of the crates, tears streaming down her sooty cheeks. She saw the silhouettes of the outlaws rounding up any survivors. Somewhere among them, Harriet Brooks was dragged out of the cabin, her hair in disarray, a bruise darkening her cheek. Lucy's heart thundered. She wanted to run to her mother's side, to fight until her last bullet. But at that moment, a rifle stock crashed against the back of her skull. White light exploded behind her eyes. She collapsed consciousness, slipping away as the outlaws' triumphant roars echoed. The last thing she recalled was Silas Kane's laughter, cruel and mocking, as he called for his men to finish the job. When Lucy stirred, the setting sun bathed Willow Creek in an eerily beautiful light. Smoke still curled from charred buildings, and the air reeked of scorched wood and blood. With a groan, she tried to move, but pain lanced through her skull. She didn't know how long she had been out. The entire settlement lay silent. Dizzy Lucy crawled on hands and knees, searching for any sign of life. She found townsfolk, some she knew intimately, others mere acquaintances lying in the street or slumped against porch rails. Each face she passed seemed frozen in horror. Tears blurred her vision as she realized the monstrous scope of the massacre. Heart-pounding, Lucy clutched a splintered support beam for balance, calling out for her mother. No one answered. She checked inside the Brooks cabin, stepping over broken furniture. Harriet was not there. Lucy's mind raced. Perhaps Harriet was dragged away with other survivors, or perhaps the worst had happened. Then another wave of dizziness hit, and Lucy staggered outside, collapsing under the thick branches of an old cottonwood. She could taste blood on her lips. With trembling fingers, she touched the back of her head, wincing at the sticky, matted hair. The edges of her vision darkened. She slumped against the tree trunk, eyes fluttering. With everyone else dead or gone, she felt certain her last moments had arrived. In the brink of her unconsciousness, Lucy vaguely registered the rhythmic thumping of hooves. At first, she feared the outlaws had returned to finish their grisly work. She tried to move, but her limbs refused. Despair crushed her. Then the footsteps slowed, and a figure dismounted. Through dimmed vision, Lucy caught a glimpse of dark braids, tanned skin, and eyes that reflected concern. A soft voice reached her ears, words in a language she didn't understand. The figure gently knelt beside her, lifting her head. Lucy's breath hitched as the person pressed a water skin to her cracked lips. Cool liquid trickled into her mouth, and she coughed, but drank. Somehow in her haze, Lucy realized she was being rescued. The man's arms slipped around her, careful not to aggravate her wounds. Just as the last shred of awareness escaped her, she heard him speak, in halting English, "You safe. I help you." When consciousness returned, Lucy was wrapped in a wool blanket inside a small adobe hut. A faint smell of sage drifted through an open window. She blinked, confused. Outside, desert winds whispered across rocky terrain. A soft moan escaped her as she tried to sit up. A man with steady eyes and braided hair appeared in the doorway. He entered slowly, not wanting to startle her. Setting aside a clay bowl of water, he pointed to himself and spoke Hashke Yazi. Lucy tried to respond, but her throat was so raw she barely managed a rasp. She nodded instead, hoping he'd sense her gratitude. The hut was sparse but clean. In the corner, a small pile of herbs, cloth bandages, and a gourd indicated someone had been caring for her wounds. Hashke knelt beside her, checking the bandage around her head. His touch was firm, yet gentle. When Lucy winced, he said softly, "Wound deep, but healing." Through careful gestures and broken words, Lucy gathered that Hashke was a Navajo warrior, a man who had served as a scout for the U.S. Army on occasion, forging an uneasy alliance in hopes of protecting his people. He had found her nearly dead under the Cottonwood and carried her across miles of desert to this small, hidden camp. Though many Navajo harbored distrust for settlers, especially after the long walk and the bitter experiences with Fort Sumner, Hashke believed in individual mercy. He couldn't leave a dying young woman to the scavengers. Lucy spent the next few days drifting between feverish dreams and painful reality. Hashke and an elderly woman named Ahiga tended her crushing herbs to help disinfect the gash on her head, boiling goat's milk to feed her when she was too weak to chew. At night, Lucy jolted awake with nightmares of the massacre, seeing again the faces of neighbors of her father collapsing in a hail of bullets and hearing the outlaws' cackling cries. Sometimes she would wake shouting, tears streaming down her cheeks. Hashke would gently calm her, murmuring in a soothing tone, even if she understood only a word or two. Gradually, Lucy regained strength. She pushed herself to stand, leaning on a walking stick. Each step was an ordeal, her body screaming in protest. But she refused to remain helpless any longer. They gave her a spare dress from a trunk, old threadbare, but better than her blood-stained rags. The first time she looked at her reflection in a bowl of water, she hardly recognized the gaunt face staring back. The biggest wound, however, was the grief lodged in her chest. She grappled with the knowledge that her father was dead, that her mother was missing, that Willow Creek was gone. More than once, Lucy collapsed into silent tears, unsure if she had the will to keep going. Hashke didn't push her. He offered quiet companionship, sometimes humming a low melody as he ground herbs. Occasionally, he'd pause and look at Lucy with a gentle sympathy that reminded her there was still kindness in this world. As Lucy's health improved, she and Hashke developed a way to communicate. He spoke more English than he initially let on, and Lucy tried to repeat Navajo words, stumbling on the unfamiliar syllables. Over small meals, they began exchanging bits of their past. Lucy explained, in a halting, raw voice, how the outlaws attacked her settlement. She described the horror of watching her father die, her mother dragged away. She confessed her guilt that she survived while so many perished. Hashke listened intently, face solemn. When she finished, he nodded. "Bad men," he said. "They not want peace." In turn, Hashke described losing family members during forced relocations. He had once scouted for the army, believing it might spare his people from further injustice. But too many times he witnessed broken promises. Bitter as it was, he decided to leave Fort Wingate behind and roam with a small band that resisted total assimilation. They staked a hidden life along desert mesas and in remote canyons. The details were different, but the pain was similar. Both had lost loved ones to brutality. Both had known the sting of betrayal. Their shared grief forged an unspoken bond. One afternoon, as Lucy was practicing walking outside the adobe hut, she noticed Hashke saddling his horse. He carried a worn rifle, checking its mechanism with a practiced hand. She leaned against a wooden post. "Where are you going?" she asked, voice still raspy. Hashke hesitated, searching for the right English words. "I go see tracks," he said. "Outlaws. Maybe they near." Lucy's heart pounded. The idea of facing those killers again made her stomach twist in fear and rage. She grit her teeth. "I want to come," she whispered. Hashke frowned. She was barely able to stand without support, let alone ride across harsh terrain in search of violent criminals. "You are not strong enough," he said gently. "Maybe later." Though disappointment stung, Lucy understood. She nodded and watched him ride away, dust swirling around the horse's hooves. She clutched the walking stick, vowing she would become strong enough to fight back. If her mother was still alive, Lucy had to find her before it was too late. And if Harriet was gone, well, Lucy would see Silas Kane hang for his crimes. Hashke returned at dusk. He was quiet, face drawn. Lucy's stomach knotted. After unsaddling his horse and offering it water, he slipped inside the hut. Lucy was seated by the small clay stove, the old woman Ahiga ladling stew into a wooden bowl for her. She glanced at Hashke, anxious. He spoke softly, explaining he'd ridden to Willow Creek only to find it completely deserted. Bodies had already begun to decay under the relentless sun. The stench of death hung heavy over the ruins. He found no sign of Harriet Brooks among the dead, which meant she was likely taken by Silas Kane's gang. Lucy set aside her bowl hands, shaking. "We have to do something," she insisted. "I can't let them get away with this. My mother could be alive." She mustered her courage, ignoring the dull ache in her head. "Take me back there. Show me what's left. I need to see it for myself." Hashke hesitated, but Lucy's eyes blazed with determination. At last, he sighed and nodded. "Tomorrow," he said. "We ride carefully." The next morning, Lucy mounted an old mare that Hashke lent her. The saddle felt unfamiliar beneath her weakened legs, but she refused to complain. Together they rode out under a sky streaked with soft pink clouds, a deceptive beauty in a land that had witnessed so much bloodshed. The journey took several hours. Lucy clung to the reins, wincing at each bump. She sensed that Hashke purposely slowed his pace, concerned for her condition. They reached Willow Creek by late afternoon. Though Lucy had steeled herself, she wasn't prepared for the ghastly sight. Ashes coated everything. The once lively main street was littered with broken wagons, burnt timbers, and the remnants of wagons. The smell of decay was overwhelming. Lucy dismounted, pressing a handkerchief to her nose. Her eyes roamed over the corpses, now unrecognizable, swollen, and reeking in the desert heat. Tears stung her eyes and her stomach churned. She found her father's body near the crates where she had taken cover. He lay face up, his single good eye closed, dried blood staining his shirt. Lucy sank to her knees, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. For a moment, she was back there in the massacre, hearing the shots, feeling the terror. Hashke stood nearby, respectful, giving her space. After a time, Lucy gathered the strength to speak. "He deserved better," she whispered. "He fought so hard." She gently closed her father's hand over the bullet wound. "I love you, Pa," she murmured. With Hashke's help, she managed a quick burial piling stones to mark Tom Brooks' grave. With heavy hearts, they checked the rest of the settlement. In the charred remains of the Brooks cabin, Lucy found a few half-burned letters from her mother Harriet's locket, containing a small drawing of Lucy and her younger sister, and a battered trunk of clothes. Lucy pressed the locket to her chest, clinging to the memory of home. While searching for any hint of the outlaw's direction, Hashke noticed fresh horse tracks leading away from the settlement. The prince suggested a large group traveling north, possibly aiming for the mountainous region near Red Rock Pass. Lucy grimly set her jaw. "They must have taken survivors as hostages, or for ransom," she said. "If my mother's among them—" She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Hashke nodded. "We follow tomorrow," he said. "Need rest now." They camped that night by the remains of Willow Creek, building a small fire far from the stench of death. Lucy hardly ate, her mind churning. She replayed every memory of Harriet, hoping the woman's spirit had survived. Lucy's hand unconsciously gripped her revolver. She vowed that if Harriet lived, Lucy would free her or die trying. Morning brought a surprise. As Lucy and Hashke packed their horses, they heard the echo of approaching riders. Two men in worn badges rode up, guns at the ready. Lucy's heart jumped, but she recognized the taller man, Sheriff Martin Ray, a traveling lawman known to patrol the region. Another deputy, a younger man named James Durant, the neighbor boy Lucy had once imagined dancing with, rode beside him. Lucy's eyes widened in relief and sorrow at once. "Lucy Brooks, Sheriff Ray," exclaimed, eyes flicking from her to Hashke. "Good Lord, we all heard Willow Creek was wiped out. Folks said no one survived." Lucy explained how Hashke saved her. She insisted she wanted to go after Silas Kane and find her mother. Sheriff Ray exchanged glances with James Durant, who looked both stunned and furious at what had happened. "I was tracking this gang after they hit a stagecoach a few miles from here," Sheriff Ray said, gesturing at the devastation around them. "Didn't realize they committed all this." Lucy laid out the plan. Sheriff Ray nodded grimly. "All right, we'll join you. But you must understand, these men are out for blood. We'll proceed carefully." The new alliance brought Lucy both comfort and dread. She worried about dragging Hashke into white men's conflicts again, especially a lawman's hunt, but she also needed all the help she could get. Harriet's life might depend on it. They rode out as a group of four. Sheriff Ray, with his broad-brimmed hat and stoic demeanor, led the way. His deputy, James Durant, fidgeted with the reins, the horror of Willow Creek's massacre still etched in his youthful eyes. Lucy and Hashke trailed slightly behind. The desert stretched before them, in waves of rust-colored earth and scattered sagebrush. Towering sandstone mesas and jagged buttes cast long shadows. The midday sun beat down, shimmering off rocky outcroppings. Lucy tried to focus on scanning the tracks. Occasionally, she'd spot a hoof print or a scrap of cloth snagged on a cactus thorn. Each sign guided them further north. Conversation was sparse. The weight of tragedy bore down on them, and exhaustion from the heat sapped their energy. Yet Lucy found herself unexpectedly comforted by Hashke's presence. Whenever their eyes met, she felt a flicker of resolve. She knew she wasn't alone. When they stopped to water the horses at a sparse creek, James Durant cleared his throat, unable to contain his concern any longer. "Lucy," he said softly, I'm so sorry about your pa. And Harriet, if there's anything—" She cut him off gently with a hand on his forearm. "Thank you, James. I appreciate it. Let's just find my mother." That's all that matters right now. On the third day of tracking, the group passed through a winding canyon. The canyon walls towered above them, streaked with desert varnish, making ambush a real possibility. Sheriff Ray signaled for caution. Sure enough, a few hundred yards in, they spotted a crumpled figure lying among the rocks. Approaching with guns drawn, they found a man half delirious, a bullet wound in his side. His name was Lester Clark, a drifter who claimed he'd been forced to join Silas Kane's gang or face death. After a botched robbery, he tried to desert, and Kane shot him for treachery. He'd crawled here to die. Through clenched teeth, he revealed that Kane had several captives, mostly women, who he planned to sell off or use as leverage against wealthy relatives. Clark thought they might be stashed in a remote hideout near Red Rock Pass. Lucy's heart hammered, praying Harriet was among them. Sheriff Ray pressed for more details, and Clark, fearing for his mortal soul, ratted out everything he knew. The gang, battered from their recent raids, was bunkering down, but also expecting a large payday once they ransomed or sold their captives. Lucy's stomach churned with rage. These men treated human lives like currency. After giving what information he could, Clark slumped back, too weak to move. Out of mercy, and because he still had a chance to live, Sheriff Ray used a small medical kit to bandage him. They left him hidden near a small overhang with water, promising to send further help if they could. Time was running short for Harriet and the others. They pushed on until nightfall, anxiety building. A swirl of storm clouds gathered overhead, a rare desert tempest threatening. Lightning flashed across distant ridges. The wind howled, whipping through the canyon gullies. Making camp in a shallow alcove, they huddled around a modest fire. Sheriff Ray and James Durant discussed strategy, how best to approach the hideout, how many men they might face. Lucy listened, mind focused on Harriet. The flames cast dancing shadows on the sandstone. Hashke quietly polished his rifle, glancing up only occasionally. During a lull in conversation, Lucy excused herself and stepped away from the campfire. She walked a short distance, her heart heavy. Memories flooded her. Harriet, singing lullabies, Harriet, hugging her tight when she was frightened by thunder. The possibility that Harriet might be living a nightmare in the bandits' grasp tormented Lucy. She sensed a presence behind her. Turning, she saw Hashke. He studied her troubled expression. "Your mother is strong," he said, voice low, each English word chosen carefully. "You must believe." Lucy swallowed hard, tears brimming. "I do believe," she whispered. Then she let out a shaky breath. "Thank you for everything." His eyes met hers, and for a moment the pain of the past receded. In the hush of night, they shared a fragile hope. Dawn broke with grim determination. Following Lester Clark's directions, the group skirted the base of a rugged plateau leading toward Red Rock Pass. They advanced cautiously, dismounting to lead their horses through narrow pathways. Sheriff Ray believed Silas Kane would have lookouts posted. Their suspicions proved correct. Partway up the pass, hidden among rocks, a sniper opened fire. Bullets ricocheted off boulders. Lucy dove behind a rocky ledge, heart pounding. James Durant took a grazing shot to the shoulder, hissing in pain. Hashke rolled to a vantage point, returning fire with his rifle. 2 quick shots, and the gunfire above ceased. Sheriff Ray climbed the rocky slope, pistol in hand, to confirm the sniper was neutralized. He returned to the group, face grim. "One of Kane's men. We need to keep moving. They know we're here now." Lucy pressed a makeshift bandage to James's bleeding shoulder. He winced, but insisted on continuing. Tension hung thick in the dusty air. Every step they took might be the last before a hail of bullets. By late afternoon, they crested the pass and beheld a sweeping view of a red-hued valley dotted with twisted juniper trees and looming rock formations. In the distance, a small ranch compound, nestled against the base of a towering cliff. Smoke curled from a chimney that Lucy realized was likely Silas Kane's hideout. Sheriff Ray and Hashkay assessed the terrain. The ranch was surrounded by a corral, a cluster of outbuildings, and a high wooden fence. Guards patrolled the perimeter, rifles slung over shoulders. Lucy's hands tightened on the reins, adrenaline surging. Harriet could be in one of those buildings. They decided on a covert approach, waiting for the cover of darkness. The plan: Hashkay and Lucy would circle to the rear, searching for a way to free prisoners, while Sheriff Ray and James created a diversion near the front gate. Timing was critical. If they were too slow, the captives might be killed. Night settled over the valley, a cold breeze rustling the sagebrush. The moon cast faint light across the rocky slopes. Lucy and Hashkay dismounted, tethering their horses behind a rock outcropping. They crept down toward the ranch's rear fence. Lucy's heart hammered so loudly she worried it would give them away. They found a section of fence in disrepair, possibly damaged by a recent storm. Quietly, Hashkay pulled loose some boards. They slipped through, crouching low. A small lantern glowed inside one of the outbuildings. From behind stacked crates, Lucy peered through a crack. Inside, cots lined the walls, and a handful of terrified women huddled together, guarded by a single outlaw dozing in a chair. Lucy scanned their faces, searching desperately for Harriet. She gasped. There, near the back, was Harriet Brooks, bruised and pale, but alive, arms around an older woman. Lucy's eyes filled with tears of relief and fury. She gripped Hashkay's arm and pointed, voice trembling. He nodded. They had to neutralize the guard quietly, if possible. Carefully, Lucy inched around to a side door of the outbuilding. Hashkay followed, rifle ready. She tried the handle, locked from within. Hashkay produced a small blade and slid it between the door and frame, jiggling the latch. Moments stretched tense as they listened for any sound of alarm. At last, the lock gave with a faint click. They slipped inside. The guard, half asleep, jerked awake at the slight noise. Lucy aimed her revolver, heart pounding. "Don't move," she hissed. But the guard's eyes flared, his hand darting for his gun. Hashkay fired a single shot, and the man slumped lifelessly on the cot, a stain spreading across his chest. The women recoiled, some stifling screams. Lucy rushed forward, pressing a finger to her lips. "Shh, we're here to help." She scanned the group until she met Harriet's eyes. A raw cry tore from Lucy's throat. She threw her arms around her mother, tears running freely. Harriet clung to Lucy with desperate relief. In that moment, the rest of the world melted away. Lucy, Harriet sobbed, voice trembling. I prayed." She couldn't finish, collapsing into her daughter's embrace. "We have to go," Lucy whispered urgently, wiping tears. "Come on." Just as they gathered, the captives' gunshots erupted near the front gate. Sheriff Ray and James Durant must have launched their diversion. Guards around the compound barked commands. Lanterns flared, and men ran toward the front. Lucy took Harriet's hand, ushering the other women outside. But their luck didn't hold. Rounding the corner, they came face to face with two more of Kane's men. One raised a shotgun. Lucy didn't hesitate. She fired a shot, striking him in the shoulder. He toppled back with a howl. The other lunged for Hashkay, who parried with his rifle, smashing the outlaw across the jaw. The man crumpled. Their escape route was open for the moment. Chaos gripped the ranch. The captives, trembling and barefoot, struggled to keep up. Lucy and Hashke ushered them to the broken fence, helping them climb through. Harriet winced a bruise on her leg, making each step painful, but she clung to Lucy's arm. Once past the fence, they hurried across moonlit sand toward the distant rock outcropping where Lucy and Hashke had tethered their horses. Gunfire continued from the front, echoing off the canyon walls. Lucy prayed Sheriff Ray and James would manage to hold off the outlaws long enough for the captives to escape. As Lucy and the group reached the rocks, two outlaws emerged from behind a juniper guns aimed. Lucy skidded to a halt. Harriet gasped. The women cowered. Hashke stepped forward, rifle at the ready. But Silas Kane himself appeared from the darkness, that twisted sneer on his lips. "Well, well," he drawled, leveling a revolver at Lucy. "If it ain't the little lady from Willow Creek, I wondered if you were still breathing after that whack on the head." Lucy's blood boiled. She remembered her father, the flames, the screams. Her gun hand shook with hatred. Harriet trembled beside her. The other outlaws flanked Kane, forming a semicircle of armed menace. "You murdered my father," Lucy spat, fighting to steady her voice. "You butchered innocent people." Kane shrugged, lips curling in a smirk. "Business is business, sweetheart. Now you all are coming with me, unless you fancy a bullet in the back." Hashke raised his rifle. "We will not go with you," he said, voice low, each word carefully pronounced. Kane's eyes flicked to the Navajo warrior, scorn twisting his expression. "Look at this. We got ourselves a hero savage. Didn't I kill enough of your kind at Canyon de Shelley?" The vile taunt made Lucy's stomach churn. She glanced at Harriet, then at the frightened captives. She knew they couldn't outrun a hail of bullets. Across the desert, distant shots told her that Sheriff Ray and James might still be too busy with the other outlaws. They were alone. Lucy had only a split second to act. Kane was outnumbered in raw head count, but most of these women were unarmed and terrified. Kane and his two men could easily gun them down. But Lucy saw the flicker of overconfidence in Kane's eyes. With lightning reflexes, she feigned a stumble, letting her knees buckle. "No, please," she cried, arm shaking. As Kane shifted his weight, sneering, Lucy jerked her revolver up and fired at the nearest outlaw. The man crumpled bullet through his chest. Hashke took that cue and fired at the second outlaw, hitting him in the stomach. The outlaw dropped, groaning. Silas Kane roared with fury, returning fire. Lucy ducked behind, a rock heart pounding. The captives scattered, screaming. Harriet crawled away, clinging to the shadows. Gunshots flashed in the darkness. Kane cursed, weaving between the boulders for cover. Hashke tried to flank him, but Kane was a seasoned killer, always on the move. Lucy scrambled for a better firing angle. She saw Kane's silhouette slip behind a jagged rock. Adrenaline surged. Creeping around the rock, Lucy found herself just feet away from Kane. Their eyes locked. She could see the madness and cruelty burning in his gaze. He swung his revolver up. Lucy squeezed the trigger, but her hammer clicked on an empty chamber. Terror jolted through her. She was out of bullets. Kane's laughter was a harsh rasp in the night. "End of the line, girl," he hissed. He cocked his gun, stepping forward. Time seemed to slow. Lucy saw her entire life flash before her. The orchard at Willow Creek, Harriet's lullabies, Tom Brooks's smile. Suddenly, a thunderous shot rang out from behind. Kane jerked, eyes widening. He dropped his revolver, blood seeping through his shirt. He stumbled, turning. Hashke stood, rifle-smoking expression grim and unyielding. With a final ragged breath, Silas Kane collapsed onto the sand. Lucy exhaled shakily, staring at the lifeless body of the man who destroyed her home. Tears blurred her vision. She turned to Hashke, who lowered his rifle, sadness etched in his dark eyes. "It is done," he said softly. In the aftermath, Harriet crawled out from behind the rocks, tears spilling down her face. Lucy rushed to her side, pulling her mother into a fierce embrace. The captives huddled together, relieved but dazed by the sudden violence. One by one, they realized the man who tormented them was dead. Moments later, Sheriff Ray and James Durant appeared, breathless rifles in hand. Their clothes were dusty, and James's wounded shoulder was stained red. But they were alive. "We took down the rest of Kane's men," Sheriff Ray said, scanning the scene. "Guess you two had your own party here." Lucy's face broke into a trembling smile. She helped Harriet stand, wincing at her mother's bruises. "We have them all," I think Lucy breathed. "We're all right now." For a moment, everyone savored the hush of victory. For Lucy, the relief was mingled with sorrow. Sorrow for all that was lost and can't be regained. Yet Harriet was alive. That single blessing outshone the darkness. They tended to the freed captives, providing blankets and checking wounds. Some needed immediate medical attention, but they were stable. The group gathered in the ranch courtyard, the corpses of Kane's men lying on the periphery. The sky lightened with dawn, painting the rugged cliffs in red-gold tones. A new day was beginning, symbolic of the second chance Lucy and her mother had been given. Sheriff Ray took stock of supplies. He found a stash of stolen goods inside the ranch house, money valuables from countless raids, including items from Willow Creek. Lucy felt a pang, seeing trinkets that once belonged to neighbors who were now dead. Harriet leaned on Lucy, tears of gratitude in her eyes. "You came all this way for me," she whispered, voice shaking. "My brave girl." Lucy squeezed her mother's hand. "I thought you were gone," she managed, voice tight. "But when I realized you might be alive, I had to try." Harriet looked at Hashke, who stood quietly on the edge of the group. Emotion quivered in her voice. "And you, sir, thank you for saving my daughter." Hashke inclined his head, humility in his gaze. "No thanks needed. She is strong." With Kane's gang dismantled, the question now was what came next. The captives needed shelter and food. Sheriff Ray planned to escort them to the nearest fort or settlement with a functioning doctor. Many wanted to return to their families if they had any left. For Lucy and Harriet, Willow Creek was no more. The place they once called home was now a mass grave. Harriet clung to Lucy's arm. "Where do we go, child?" she asked, eyes brimming with unspoken grief. Lucy thought of the cabin now, nothing but charred remains. Tom Brooks' grave under the scorching sun. She swallowed her sorrow, turning to Hashke. "Will you be returning to your people?" Hashke shrugged, a subtle motion of the shoulders. "I wonder. My path is not settled." Sheriff Ray interrupted gently. "Lucy, Harriet, we can bring you to Red Hawk Settlement. It's a few days' ride south. There's a good doc there, Dr. Harriet Caldwell. You can rest, figure out your future. The good folks there will help you get back on your feet." Harriet nodded wearily. Lucy bowed her head in acceptance. She had no illusions that any settlement would replace Willow Creek. But Harriet needed care, and they needed time to grieve, to heal, to plan. They secured the ranch's remaining horses for those who couldn't walk well, preparing to ride at dawn. As they rested in the courtyard, Lucy noticed Hashke quietly gathering his belongings. She approached him, heart heavy. "You're leaving," he nodded, pausing to meet her gaze. "My journey goes another way," he said quietly. Many places need help, many battles yet to fight. Lucy felt a pang of sadness. Though they had known each other only a short while, they'd shared a bond forged in blood and survival. "Thank you for everything," she whispered. She hesitated, then pressed Harriet's old locket into his hand. "A small token. It's from my family. And now you're part of that story too." Hashke studied the locket, the tiny drawing inside. He looked at Lucy with a mixture of gratitude and humility. "I will keep it safe." He placed the locket around his neck under his shirt. They stood in silence for a moment, neither sure how to say goodbye. Finally, Hashke extended his hand, and Lucy clasped it, tears gathering. Then he stepped onto his horse and rode off the desert, swallowing him just as it had delivered him into her life. Lucy watched until he became a distant speck, the wind carrying the faint echo of hoofbeats. With the departure of Hashke, Lucy felt a hollowness, but Harriet's warm presence reminded her that life persisted. Sheriff Ray James Durant, Lucy, Harriet, and the other freed captives began the trek to Red Hawk Settlement. The path wound through desert basins and across winding gullies. The group traveled slowly, ensuring the wounded didn't strain themselves. Lucy saw how James looked at her, sorrowful and protective, but she was too raw to consider any romantic attachments. Her heart was consumed by mourning her father, the townsfolk, and the life that was gone forever. Yet Harriet's hand in hers offered solace. It was enough to know they weren't alone. They forded a shallow river, the water cold against their aching feet. Each night they made camp, sharing meager rations. Around the campfire, the survivors exchanged stories, some tearful, some angry. Lucy found a strange comfort in their companionship. Together, they bore witness to each other's pain, forging a sense of unity that might help them rebuild. On the fifth day, they reached Red Hawk Settlement, a modest but thriving community nestled near a bend in the Rio Blanco. Single-story wooden buildings lined the main street, and a humble church steeple rose against the dusty skyline. Farmers and traders bustled about, greeting the newcomers with wary curiosity. Sheriff Ray introduced them to the local authority, a stern but fair man named Deputy Thomas B. Collins. After hearing the story of Silas Kane's downfall, Collins offered heartfelt condolences and promptly helped find rooms for Harriet and Lucy in a small boarding house run by Mrs. Elizabeth Caldwell, sister of the town doctor. With Harriet limping and Lucy exhausted, the sisters walked them to a warm, cozy room with a single bed and a cot. It wasn't home, but it was safe. That night, after a simple meal, Lucy helped Harriet wash up and dress her bruises. Dr. Harriet Caldwell visited, applying salves and prescribing rest. Lucy was struck by the compassion in the woman's eyes. It reminded her that not all the world was cruel. Days turned to weeks in Red Hawk. Harriet's bruises slowly faded, though her emotional scars lingered. Lucy found occasional work at the local mercantile, helping restock shelves and manage inventory. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave her purpose and a few coins to pay for their lodging. Sheriff Ray traveled on, continuing his mission to keep law and order. James Durant stayed a little longer, assisting in repairs around the settlement, but eventually he returned to his family farmland outside Willow Creek's ruins, hoping to salvage something of his own past. Lucy found herself drifting, sometimes mind returning to the moment she almost died under the cottonwood. She remembered Hashke's firm arms, lifting her, the quiet determination in his dark eyes. She wondered where he was now, somewhere in the vast desert, perhaps aiding another soul in need. At times, Harriet would press a comforting hand to Lucy's shoulder. "You've done so much, child," she'd say softly. "Give yourself time to grieve." But Lucy wasn't sure how to grieve properly. If not for Harriet, she might have wandered off a restless spirit. Sometimes late at night, she would slip outside, gazing at the star-filled sky. She could almost sense a presence there, a silent communion with her father's spirit and with the memory of the Navajo warrior who saved her. One afternoon, about a month after arriving in Red Hawk, Lucy was at the mercantile's counter, counting goods. A small commotion outside drew her attention. Stepping onto the porch, she saw a stranger dismounting a weary horse. He was a young man, with thick black hair, wearing a dust-stained coat. He clutched his side, a dark stain spreading across his shirt. The man toppled off the horse, hitting the ground hard. Alarmed townsfolk rushed to help. Lucy's heart lurched as she recognized him, Lester Clark, the outlaw who had deserted Silas Kane's gang. He was pale, badly wounded, but still alive. She helped drag him inside, laying him on a spare bed in the back room. Dr. Harriet Caldwell was summoned. Lucy knelt by Lester's side, confusion warring in her chest. This was the man who had ridden with Silas Kane, albeit unwillingly. Now, he was near death again. When Lester's feverish eyes flicked open, he rasped, "I had to warn you. Others, survivors of Kane's gang, might come for revenge. They blame you for Kane's death." Lucy's spine tingled. Of course not all the outlaws were accounted for. Some had scattered into the desert, waiting for a chance to strike. A knot of fear coiled in Lucy's gut. Would this nightmare never end? Deputy Collins convened a quick meeting. He paced the small office, his brow furrowed. "Lester says a half-dozen of Kane's men are regrouping under a vicious gunslinger named Lyle Granger. They want to track you, Lucy, and Harriet, and kill you for what happened." Lucy swallowed, her pulse racing. Harriet, sitting beside her, looked worried but resolute. Dr. Caldwell had stabilized Lester's wound, though he was still too weak to travel. He repeated his warning. Lyle Granger was a former Confederate guerrilla, rumored to be even more brutal than Kane. Deputy Collins rubbed the back of his neck. "We can't let them bring violence here. We need to prepare." He gave Lucy a measured look. "You've fought these men before. We could use your help." She nodded slowly. Though fear rattled her, she refused to run. "I won't let them hurt anyone else," she said. Harriet touched her hand in silent support. Red Hawk settlement was no fortress, but it had decent fortifications. A plan was set. The men would form a militia and stand guard at the perimeter. Lucy, who had proven her skill in a fight, was asked to patrol near the north entrance, rifle in hand. Harriet would help treat the wounded in case of an attack. Word spread quickly, and Red Hawk's citizens, though many were humble farmers, rallied to defend their homes. They built barricades of crates, wagons, and lumber, forming improvised battlements at key choke points. Volunteers practiced shooting in a makeshift range behind the blacksmith's shop. The blacksmith, a grizzled veteran named Elijah Davis, forged extra ammunition and hammered out scrap metal into rudimentary armor plates for the barricades. Lucy found herself working side by side with tough ranchers and timid shopkeepers alike. The unity reminded her of Willow Creek before the Massacre, neighbors coming together in adversity. Each hammer blow echoed with the memory of her father's sacrifice. She clung to that memory, letting it fuel her determination. She wouldn't let Granger's men slaughter innocents as Kane's men had done. Days passed with tension mounting. Some scouted the nearby trails, but saw no sign of outlaws. Lucy grew restless. Harriet spent her time at the clinic with Dr. Caldwell, preparing bandages and herbal tinctures. The wait was excruciating. On a brisk morning, while Lucy was patrolling the northern edge of town, she spotted a flicker of movement on the horizon, the glint of sunlight on metal. She raised her rifle scope. 6 riders. They moved in a tight formation, dust clouds trailing behind them like a warning. Lyle Granger's gang had arrived. The alarm bells rang through Red Hawk. Deputy Collins mustered the militia. Citizens ducked behind barricades, rifles cocked. Lucy's palms grew sweaty on her rifle. She took a steadying breath, remembering her father's lessons. Breathe. Aim. Don't rush the shot. The riders approached brazenly, halting 100 yards away. A tall man with a scarred cheek and cold eyes spurred his horse forward. Lyle Granger, presumably. His harsh voice carried across the open space. "We know Lucy Brooks and Harriet Brooks are in there. Send them out, or we burn your town to the ground." A murmur ran through the defenders. Lucy stood atop a makeshift watchtower, heart thudding. Harriet was somewhere behind her, likely in the clinic. Lucy refused to flee or surrender. She raised her rifle crosshairs fixed on Granger's chest. She shouted back, "Leave now or face justice." Granger laughed, the sound hollow and menacing. "Justice? I'll show you justice." He fired a shot in the air, spurring his men to charge. Gunfire erupted. Granger's outlaws galloped toward the barricades, unleashing a volley of bullets. Settlers returned fire from behind crates and wagons. Smoke billowed in the dusty street as horses reared and men shouted. Lucy squeezed the trigger, hitting one of the outlaws in the shoulder. He toppled from his horse. She recocked and fired again, forcing another rider to veer off course. Behind her, she heard the crack of rifles, the whiz of bullets overhead. Someone cried out in pain. Fear pulsed through Lucy, but she forced it down, focusing on each shot. Lyle Granger zigzagged through the melee, barking orders. One of his men lobbed a lit bottle of kerosene at a wooden building. Flames whooshed upward, igniting a section of the barricade. Chaos increased tenfold. From the corner of her eye, Lucy saw Harriet rushing out of the clinic, frantic to help a wounded defender who lay exposed in the street. Lucy's heart lurched. "No, Ma, stay back," she yelled, but Harriet moved with a caregiver's desperation. She managed to drag the wounded man behind cover bullets sparking around her. Lucy breathed a small sigh of relief. Amid the fray, Lucy locked eyes with Lyle Granger. Rage twisted his features. He spurred his horse, charging her position. Lucy scrambled down the watchtower as he leapt from the saddle, brandishing a revolver and a Bowie knife. Townsfolk scattered, leaving Lucy face to face with the gang's leader. "You cost me good men," Granger snarled, knife glinting. "And Silas Kane was my friend." Lucy raised her rifle, but Granger fired first, forcing her to dive behind a barrel. She felt the heat of the bullet slice past her arm. Pain flared, but it wasn't deep. She rolled, fumbling for her father's old Colt revolver at her belt. She had reloaded it that morning, determined to keep it close. Granger advanced, firing again. The shot splintered the barrel, showering Lucy with shards of wood. She scrambled to her feet, pivoting, pulling the revolver's trigger. The bullet winged Granger's leg. He hissed, staggering. Seizing the moment, Lucy leveled the gun at his chest. But Granger threw the Bowie knife. She tried to dodge, but the blade grazed her side, slicing through her shirt and drawing blood. Lucy cried out in pain, vision flashing. She staggered, revolver dropping from numb fingers. Granger lunged, adrenaline fueling him, ignoring his wounded leg. He slammed Lucy against a wagon, hand clenched around her throat. Granger's grip on Lucy tightened, choking the air from her lungs until a shot rang out. Granger staggered, blood blooming on his vest. Lucy turned to see Hashke Yazzie, rifle smoking, having returned in her moment of need. As Granger collapsed, Lucy stepped forward, revolver in hand. "Your reign ends here," she said coldly, watching him die. With their leader gone, the outlaws surrendered or fled. Smoke drifted through Red Hawk, and the battle was over. Harriet ran to Lucy's side, weeping in relief. Hashke knelt beside them, eyes meeting Lucy's in silent understanding. Once again, he had saved her life, and this time, a town's future too. In the days after the battle, Red Hawk began to rebuild. The townsfolk buried their dead, patched up their homes, and gave heartfelt thanks to Lucy Harriet Deputy Collins, and especially Hashke. Lucy spent her days helping at the clinic, still haunted by loss. One afternoon, she found Hashke at the forge. "If you hadn't found me, I'd have died under that cottonwood," she said softly. Hashke gave a quiet smile. It was meant to be. When Harriet asked him to stay, he hesitated, then agreed to remain for a while to help protect the town. That evening, Lucy sat on the boarding house steps, the stars glowing above her. She remembered the nights of fear and confusion after Willow Creek burned. But now, she had her mother, a purpose, and someone who understood her scars. Under the endless desert sky, she whispered thanks for survival, for strength, and for the miracle named Hashke. Thank you for joining us on this epic journey through the unforgiving Wild West. We witnessed Lucy Brooks survive a horrific massacre thanks to the mercy of a Navajo warrior, two souls from different worlds bound by shared courage. Their story reminds us that even in the darkest times, compassion can spark hope. If you were moved by Lucy's fight to save her mother, if you cheered when they joined forces to stop the ruthless outlaws, then help us keep the spirit of the frontier alive. Like this video to show your support for stories of determination and redemption. Share it with fellow fans of thrilling Western dramas, and subscribe to our channel for more tales that blend history, action, and heart. Together, let's honor the memory of those who faced the frontier's trials and emerged stronger, forging a future that dared to dream of peace.